So, what does it mean to be a manager? Part of being a manager is being a leader. You always want to make sure to lead by example. You want to use empathy. Now, not a lot of people know what empathy is, but empathy is when you put yourself in another person's shoes. You always want to try to limit your personal biases and try to take them out of the equation and just try to understand where the other person is coming from. So just try to put yourself in their shoes. Say, if I was this person, what could I possibly be thinking? Sure, people have flawed logic, and sometimes it's good to try to get into that flawed logic because once you understand what they're thinking, you can better alleviate that scenario and just fix whatever problem is or conflict is occurring at the time. You always want to be genuine. People can tell when you're being fake. So don't ever try to pretend to be something you're not. Even if you're not good at something and you want to instruct somebody to be good at something, sometimes it's good to even say, like I had a karate sensei once that used to say, I'm not particularly good at this move, so do as I say, not as I do. So just whenever possible, you want to lead by example and do what you want them to do, but there might be a scenario where you are weak on something, and there's nothing wrong with expressing that weakness and say, look, I'm not all that great at this thing, but this is the best practice in how you should do it. But always remember to be genuine. Don't pretend to be something that you're not. Being a good leader also sometimes means being a mentor. So being an official mentor and kind of mentoring somebody through things or coaching them, so to speak. So as a leader, you're going to have to do that, but then you'll always have an option at some point to take on somebody as a mentee, for example, right? But that's something you want to make sure to be super sure about if you ever do decide to do that. And also as a leader, you want to always motivate people. So even if you're feeling kind of down or not particularly on board for a particular task or project, you want to try to kind of keep that stuff down. If you do want to vent about it with your supervisor. It's never really appropriate to vent about it with your team or your subordinates. You want to always appear that you are, on board with the project. And while that might seem to conflict a little bit with being genuine, you have to try to think of it as you're a team player and this is what was decided to be done. And even if you don't particularly feel like it's the right path, express that to the manager in an appropriate manner, but the manager should do what they can to kind of get buy-in from you so that you can then feel motivated to move forward with it. So try to, at a certain point, get on board, so to speak, so that way you're not necessarily being ingenuine and then you can work to motivate your team. If you follow these tips, it will allow you to build trust with your team, and trust is critical. Your team's not going to want to follow you if they don't trust you. You want to do everything in your power to empower your team. So identify strengths and weaknesses. Work with your team, and this is where the mentorship comes in a bit, to help them resolve any issues that they might have, like identify and resolve. This empowers them to do good going forward. Another part of being a manager is being a taskmaster. So in the last slide, we talked about leadership and kind of like building up your team. The taskmaster portion of the job is more about just making sure everything gets done. So it's kind of like balancing these two things that you want to do. You don't want to be too much of a taskmaster and you also don't want to be too much of a leader. You have to balance both, like building up your team, but also making sure things get done. So it's critical as a resource manager, you know everything that's happening in the office. Your full-time manager is counting on you for that. You are a 90% student-run service desk, and that's done by the resource managers being on top of everything that's going on. You have to be able to prioritize things. There will be times where you're not sure about priorities, and that's fine. That's where your full-time manager comes in. But generally, as you gain experience, you'll have a good sense of how to prioritize things. And the main thing is keeping your team on task, making sure that they're working hard and being efficient. Some things to keep in mind when doing this is learning about your team. Take a look at who you have on during your shift. They're going to have strengths and weaknesses. There's certain people you're going to want to assign certain tasks to. And like I said prior, there's certain people you're going to want to mentor and help them, empower them to overcome weaknesses to make them more usable generally. So it's kind of like a win-win there. You help your team improve, and it also helps you because you have more resources to pull from. Another part of being a resource manager is being an enforcer. It's not always fun being the enforcer. It's going to be scenarios where people aren't following the rules and you have to do something about that. We don't necessarily expect you to confront people, but you do need to take note of any issues. This is a critical piece. You want to make sure that you're the one to let your full-time manager know if something went wrong or any bad behavior, etc. You don't want your full-time manager to find that out from someone else, because then it ends up being that you are part of the issue. So definitely take note of any issues, any bad behavior, failure to follow procedure, and make sure to notify your full-timer as soon as possible. Some other things to keep in mind with enforcement is just looking, kind of doing a little QC, making sure that people are paying attention to detail, following procedures, things of that sort. You want to also make sure to know where your resources are. So resources are people, but they're also things like the knowledge base and other people that you know you can pull from for knowledge if you don't know how to solve a problem. Make sure that your team or yourself are following up with clients as appropriate, and then you should be successful. Another part of being a resource manager is improving the team, improving your office, improving the department. So look for ways to optimize. You do this by observing, just taking note of things, evaluating the things that you observe, and then putting together a plan of action or a proposal of how to improve things. You're lucky to be part of a team where the management cares about what you think, so we're always looking to stars for improvements. Throughout the years, a lot of the improvements that have come about from prior stars, not just resource managers, but as resource managers, we expect a little bit more from you. So look at some of the current policies and procedures. If you see things that you feel like don't fit or don't work right, or you're not sure why we're doing them, please ask, and a full-timer should be able to explain why. And if they can't, please challenge them or come to me, and I'd be glad to talk more about that. I mentioned earlier being a mentor, and as I said, as a resource manager, you're going to have to do coaching and some mentorship. But you also may at some point decide that you want to take on a particular star as your mentee, and that's fine and encouraged. So this is a little bit about being a mentor. So it's about building a relationship, a little bit personal and a little bit business. Remember, as I said before, a good leader always has to be genuine. The kind of goal here is generally to develop a well-rounded person, but keep in mind that your mentee should drive this a bit. So you should kind of work with them and have them identify particular goals for the mentorship relationship. Always be empathetic. Always use active listening. A lot of people don't understand what active listening is. In most conversations, people hear each other, but they don't necessarily hear the actual message. When you're actively listening, it's actually work. You're actually working to prevent noise from interfering with the message. Noise can be anything from actual noise, such as a garbage truck in the background or a police car driving by, but it can also be your own inherent biases. You've grown up and have certain inherent biases based on your prior experience. And it's important to be aware of those things and work to put them aside while listening to somebody. A good way to ensure that you have received the message is to paraphrase that message back to the person who sent it to you. This allows that person to approve, so to speak, to tell you, yes, you did get the message. And the other critical piece is only mentor if you want to. So as I said, there's official mentoring and then the kind of mentoring that goes on with leadership, which is really more of being a coach. So as a resource manager, you do have to be a coach, but you don't necessarily have to be a mentor.